Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 435. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Are you in hustle mode, a doctor with a professional-looking website and not making sales or six figures? Lean in and listen to Dr. Kimmy, CEO and founder of the Doctor Coach School. Welcome, Dr. Kimmy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the blanks and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
Absolutely. So by training, I am a pediatric hospitalist. So I would take care of the babies and children on the inpatient pediatric units. And I worked as a professor in a medical school as well. And I no longer do that. I'm now full-time in my business as the CEO of the Doctor Coach School. So basically, when women doctors, especially women doctors of color, want to become coaches, when they want to learn how to sell their coaching offer, how to market their coaching offer, and how to get clients results, they come to me and I help them in that regard inside of the Doctor Coach School. So I started my business in 2020. We've had pretty rapid growth, which is such a blessing. So yeah, that's who I am in that regard. I'm also a wife and a mom of two kids. My son Israel is 13 and my daughter Sela is 7. I also homeschool. So lots of things going on here.
Tell us that aha moment when you knew your business was going to be successful.
Oh, that's a good question. When I knew my business was going to be successful, it was actually May 1st of 2020. So on May 1st of 2020, I made my very first dollar in my business. It was actually $997 because that's how much my first offer was. And I just decided that if someone was willing to pay me money for the expertise I have and for the work that I do, that my business has to be successful. So I just decided that once someone's paid me, that means I just have to figure out how to do that over and over again and scale that and get even more people and raise my prices. But really on that day, I knew that I would have a successful business because I decided I was never going to give up until I do. So really, it's just about staying in the game. If someone pays you once, many people will pay you again and again and again. So
tell us the backstory. How did you figure that out? How did you figure out that, when you talked about, well, you didn't talk about, but I read your story, heard your story a little bit about being in the hustle mode. And so there's a lot of people that have the title coach and they are not making the money. Mm-hmm. How did you figure it out?
So really good question. So I actually spent all of 2020 in that hustle mode, right? Trying to copy what I saw the millionaires, millionaire coaches doing, trying to recreate that and really failing pretty miserably that first year. And so what ended up happening for me was it was December of 2020. I was down to my last $2,000 in my business bank account. And I had one VA at the time. And I had a decision to make because I had just had a launch and I had made maybe like $1,500 and I wasn't going to be selling it again for like another 7 or 8 weeks. And so that really wasn't sustainable. I was not making the money that I wanted to make to be able to replace my income. But then also I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have, right? I wasn't working with the people that I was hoping to, affect and change their lives. And so I just remember sitting at my desk here in this office, and it didn't look like this. It was just a white wall behind me. And I had to make a decision. And I'm a woman of faith. So the first thing I did was I prayed and I just got really honest and with myself that what I was doing was not working. And so what I made the determination to do was I was going to find someone who was making the money that I want to make in the way that I want to make it, like has similar circumstances to me, but was and had similar values to me. And I was going to become a student of her work. I decided to completely humble myself, move myself out of the way, and just learn a process and utilize that process and execute on that process. I have since developed my own selling frameworks and my own strategies and my own methodologies, but that really came out of first deciding again to humble myself, move myself out of the way. Don't I'm smart, quote unquote, and I'm a doctor and I should be able to figure this out, but I haven't figured it out. So who can I learn from? Who can I really look to for that mentorship and guidance? And how can I invest in my learning and become a student again? And I just basically had to build the belief that I've been able to learn so much along the way to develop my career. There must be like I can do this thing, but I need to learn and implement and fail and learn from the failure and keep going. And so that's what I did in the beginning of 2021. And that's when my business really took off. And I, within 6 months hit six figures. It was really just a process of me learning from my coach. And then along the way, I started seeing, okay, well, this part works for me. That part, I want to tweak it. And, that's how I sort of developed my own process. But it had to start with me really firmly understanding the process of someone who did it. I'm like, well, if she did it, then let me just like, why am I really trying to reinvent the wheel, which is what I was trying to do in 2020 and like kind of hustle and figure it out on my own. So that's my story in that regard. That's how I was able to change the trajectory of my business.
And when we look at being in business, chasing the shiny objects and trying to fake it till we make it, what advice would you give someone listening to this podcast?
One of the first things I always say to the women in my community and my clients is what's in your hand. So if like in terms of and even if you don't necessarily subscribe to the Bible, it's still a relevant reference. When Moses, saw the burning bush and God's like, go, let my people go. And Moses is like, I mean, what am I going to use? How am I going to show them? Which is essentially kind of where we are in business, right? Like, how do I show them that I am hearing from you? How do I show them? Like, how are they going to believe me? Which if people are not buying your coaching offer, it's just that they don't believe you. That's really all that's happening, right? So what God said was, what's in your hand, right? Use what's in your hand. And so one of the things that that was for Moses was his staff, and he showed the signs and wonders through the staff that was in his hand. And one of the things I tell my clients is what's in your hand is your story. You should always start there. So I started my business as a procrastination coach because I had overcome crippling procrastination. I had, I was a hot mess before I learned how to develop systems and processes and self-coaching tools in my life to overcome procrastination. So that's what I started with. I didn't know I would be a business coach per se when I first started. I didn't know that I'd be helping women in this way. I just started with what was in my hand. So I think sometimes, again, we're chasing shiny objects and looking at what other people are doing rather than using what's in our hand. What do we know? People will pay us for what we know, what the expertise we have. But if we're just kind of looking to others and trying to recreate what other people are doing, that actually comes across in our marketing and in our selling because we're not sold on it. And one of the things I say is you have to be sold on something in order to sell it to someone else. So that's the biggest piece of advice is what is in your hand. Start with your story, build out your offer from there, from that place.
When you're going through, I think the question would be someone saying, oh, Dr. Kimmy, that sounds so simple. What is your story? What is in your hand? Start from there. And it is really some profound advice. when you're in that hustle mode, you're in that panic mode, you're down to your last, how are you uncovering that story?
Well, I think that that's a really good question. One of the things I talk about, I think we have to talk about the emotions of entrepreneurship and the emotions of building a business in addition to just the strategy, right? So if you are down to your last, so you're in hustle mode and you're like trying to figure it out, one of the things that really worked for me and still works for me, right? Because I still have those moments when I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to bring in revenue. What am I? So one of the things that works for me is really just like spending some time with my emotions first before I start trying to jump into the strategy, right? Because if you're in scarcity because there's limited resources or you're running out of time or you're running out of money, all of that, then some business coach saying to you, well, start with your story. It's not going to resonate. You're like, listen, I'm trying to make money today. Okay. Like, what is this crazy lady talking about? What do I do today to make money? So I think that it's going to always be hard to sell, right? And if we're in entrepreneurship, then our job is to solve someone's problem for money. So it's going to be hard to sell when we are feeling that scarcity. So I think bringing ourselves, people are like, oh, you should like abundance and feel abundant. Sometimes it's hard to get from scarcity to abundance. Can you just feel sufficient? Can you just get yourself to the place of okayness with your current circumstances, right? Like, so for me, it was like my last $2,000. That was it. I actually had to tell my VA, I can't pay you right now. I can't pay you, but I had to find my okayness and my sufficiency first, because when you don't have just that sufficiency, imagine walking into a used car dealership and like the used car salesperson, it's like the last day of the month and they haven't hit their goal. You feel that, like you feel that as the person who is being sold to, right? Like you feel like their energy of I gotta latch onto her and make sure she buys, that actually pushes you away. And so the first thing that you have to do is just understand that you're here to serve another person. And in order to do that, you gotta really look at your emotions of scarcity, at least get yourself to the place of understanding, I have what I need. I have enough. I don't need anything from anyone. And when you believe you don't need anything from anyone, the way you show up in the sales relationship completely changes. And then we can address things like strategy and starting with your story, etc. But if you're on your last dime, you gotta, I understand that it sounds good, but how do I execute on that? You have to build up a list of evidence. I call it an evidence bank, a bank of evidence for how you are okay. It's just going to be so hard to sell from a place of scarcity and fear. And I don't know if this is going to work for me and I need money right now. It's going to be hard. Your people are going to be pushed away by that. So before we can even talk about strategy, we got to deal with our own emotions. And that's one of the things we talk about pretty extensively in my coaching program as well.
Who is your ideal client?
My ideal client is a woman doctor of color who has done something incredible in her life. So she has changed her life in some way. Maybe she's lost weight. Maybe she has, executed on a promotion. Maybe she has, like in my case, I overcame procrastination. So she's done so, it could be things like you parent with ease and grace, or you're co-parenting in a way that, your children are living happy lives, but you're able to co-parent with someone you're no longer married to, or maybe you've been able to find love after divorce. They've done something incredible in their lives and they want to help other people do the same, but they don't understand how to market their offer, how to sell their offer on a sales call. Like all of that feels like really daunting. It feels like they're going to have to throw spaghetti at the wall. And they want to be able to show up in a sales relationship and have success and convert clients and make money and hit six figures in their business, whether or not they want to stay in their profession or not. Some people want to stay and just have extra income. Some people do want to quit. And I have doctors who have been able to quit their jobs. but they want to be a coach that makes money. And so those are the people that come to me.
What is the best decision you've made as a leader?
Oh, that's a really good question. The best decision I've made as a leader is saying no to clients who, like, there's some sort of hint on the sales call or in the sales relationship that that person is not a good fit, and listening to that inner voice and saying no, even though it would have been really easy to, accept their money because they wanted to pay me and they wanted to join. But understanding that the integrity of the container and also my integrity as a coach is not going to be, well served if I allow someone in to the program and they're not a good fit for the work that we do. And so saying no to people, especially again, when you have income goals, you have things you're trying to do, but saying no to someone or saying not right now to them is the best decision that I've made as a leader, even though it can be, again, quite challenging in the beginning to do that. You have to kind of build that up as a muscle, but being very discerning of exactly, like you said, exactly who is my ideal client, who am I here to serve, who can I help? And everyone else, right now, I'm not going to be able to help you, and just being comfortable with that discomfort.
There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Well, it's not actually related to coaching. I hope that's okay. That is like another brand or business.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. And it's whatever comes to mind for you, a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire. It doesn't have to be in the coaching field, in any industry.
Yeah. So I really love Mayel Organics. It's a hair care line that is, was founded by a Black woman. And actually she started it with her husband. And the reason I'm so impressed with them is, number one, the way she founded her company was really based on her story, right? Even though it's again, a hair care line, she really looked at what was in her hand, what she was doing with her own hair, the success she's been able to have with her hair and her daughter's hair, and really started her business from there. She's a woman of faith, and so she incorporates that into her marketing, into her branding, which I really respect and appreciate. And they were able to be acquired last year. And I love that she just, decided to make that decision to be acquired, even though there was going to be a lot of backlash, a lot of pushback, and there was, but she really stood firm in that decision to create generational wealth for herself, and her family, and then also to grow her business. So I love her brand and what she's been able to accomplish. And then like a really like tied with that would just also be Arian Simone with the Fearless Fund. So the Fearless Fund is an organization that provides funding for women of color, and Arian is just an incredible lighthouse in this world for like just creating a huge brand that the entire purpose is to help women of color entrepreneurs achieve funding. And right now she's being sued by the same people who overturned affirmative action. She's being sued. And so really I'm just watching her go through this battle with so much grace. And it's so inspiring to me, because I probably would be in a very different place if I were being sued by like a major organization, right? So I'm so impressed with her and the work that she's done and will continue to do. And I'm really like praying for her. She's also a woman of faith, really praying for her, because it's a huge battle that she has ahead. So yeah, those would be the two companies and brands that are really inspiring me right now.
Absolutely. What problem exists in the world today, Dr. Kimmy, that you would like to solve?
Oh, right off the bat. The problem that exists in the world that I would like to solve is essentially the wealth gap between Black families and white families. And that's one of the reasons I even started the Doctor Coach School, I know that when more wealth is in the hands of women of color, we systematically always give, right? We're such givers. And sometimes to our own detriment, right? But I know that lives will be changed when we have more. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with my business is scale it to multiple seven, eight figures pretty quickly, because I actually want to start a nonprofit that is dedicated to helping women of color launch their businesses. So maybe women of color who don't have the traditional resources or access to, funding or mentorship, or are not able to afford coaching, but have an idea, have a business idea, a goal that they want to achieve. I want to help them do that, not just doctors, like everyone, right, through my nonprofit. And so that's the work that I want to do, because again, I know when Black women have money, like our entire community is going to change. And so that's my like ultimate dream.
What is your zone of genius?
My zone of genius is selling. My zone of genius is helping people develop their offers and learning really the psychology of sales, and being able to take someone who has never sold anything before, like never sold their coaching offer in the past, to be able to have, sell a $5,000 coaching offer, a $10,000 up to a $20,000 coaching offer, like my clients do. So really understanding the mechanics of sales, and not so much a script per se, but really understanding what's happening in the client's brain, what's happening in your brain when you're selling, how to merge those two, how to, communicate your offer, all of that, that's related to selling. That's truly my zone of genius, and I love it.
Talk to a younger you. What advice would you give to a younger Dr. Kimmy?
The advice that I would give to a younger Dr. Kimmy. So I'm going to talk to the version of myself when I was working in academic medicine, trying to impress my bosses and move up the ladder, be promoted, all of that, but was struggling. I was a hot mess. I would procrastinate on everything. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I would just really talk to her about the value that she has inside, that she is valuable regardless of if anyone else sees it. Like, she has to see it first, and that they are blessed to have you. Like, I think sometimes we, especially as women of color professionals, when we achieve these milestones and we get the job or the career, we tend to have a tendency to have like kind of that false gratitude of like, well, I should be grateful to even have a job. Like, I should be thankful that I'm even here at all, that they accepted me. They should be grateful that you decided to work for them, right? Because you are the prize. Like, you are what's bringing the value to the organization. It took me so long to realize that. And I would love to say that to the younger version of myself, or the younger version of any of your listeners, to really, really understand your own value.
And that's interesting when you talked about the psychology of selling, and what's going on in your mind, even the psychology of reframing or reprogramming your mind from employee to entrepreneur. Talk about that.
Oh boy. Well, the first thing that I was actually thinking about this recently, because I was on another podcast and we talked about this. Before I could go from employee to entrepreneur, right? Like, sometimes, again, we want to take those big jumps from like scarcity to abundance, employee to entrepreneur. I had to first see myself as a business and see my employer as a client, right? So, like, again, I am bringing the value, I am bringing the goods, and I am providing that to my client right now, who happens to be my employer. And so that shift. So if you're still working in your job, how can you really see yourself as a business, right? Like, what are the deliverables of your business? Like, ultimately, businesses solve problems in exchange for money. So if you were hired to solve your employer's problem or a facet of their problem, and then they pay you, right? Like, so in exchange for money. So it's the exact same thing. So where I really had to get really clear with myself on exactly what is the value I bring to the table and list it out, like write it out. Like, what do I offer that they are not going to be able to find anywhere else? And then once I was able to do that, I'm able to now show up at work with that confidence of I know exactly what I bring to the table. And so that shift, right? Because that's the same mindset that we need when we're selling to our clients. That shift, though, had to start with me as I was working, and I showed up differently. Right. I showed up differently. The way I carried myself was different. The way I executed on tasks became very different. They noticed it. Right. And so when I actually then put in my resignation letter because I was going to be stepping out on my own, it was a very different conversation. They really understood what they were losing because I had now understood my value, right? And so the negotiations of, well, we'll give you this much money and we'll promote you to dean, like all the things that they offered me, I knew that building my own table was going to get me so much more. So I continued to walk away. But maybe you don't even desire to walk away. Maybe you really just want to be promoted and have your business on the side. Well, you have to really understand the value of what you bring to the table first. And so before you jumping from employee to entrepreneur, like, see, how are you already a business? How are you already solving problems for money? And treat your employer like your client, and you're going to see completely, like, it's going to be like a 180, like night and day. And then you'll be able to really effectively transition that into your business.
I want you to have a thank fest. I want you to thank people and situations that has impacted your life. Have at it.
Oh, yeah. So obviously, thank God for everything, for just making me who I am, for being there for me every day, even though he's the God of the universe. So would not have to, but he does. And so I'm so grateful. I also would love to thank my mother. She's no longer with us. Her story is a huge part of my story. When she passed away, I actually found a manuscript that she had written by hand. So she had written a book by hand more than 20 years prior and never told anyone about it. So she essentially passed away with her hopes and dreams not fully being realized. And that's when I knew I needed to make a change. And that was in 2017. And that was really the start of my journey. I would not have my business if I didn't have that moment in my mom's living room when I looked over, saw an envelope, and saw that my mom, had dreams that she never fully realized. So I would just like to thank her for just being who she was in my life, the best mom in the entire world. And I wouldn't be who I am or where I am without her. I'd love to thank my husband, Adrian. He is incredible. When I was training and he was working on his PhD, and I had a 3-month-old baby, he stayed home with our baby and took care of our baby so that I could pursue my dreams. And he's never been anything but supportive of me in, even when I said I was going to quit my doctor job, like that's, and it was never a question for him. He knew I would be successful or we would figure it out. So I would love to thank him, my children, for just being who they are and bringing so much love and light to our lives, and for the encouragement. They actually really encourage me as well. They're like my biggest cheerleaders. They want to know, like, when did mommy make a sale and what's happening in my business. So really want to thank them for that as well. I want to thank every single client that has ever put their faith in me or my processes to help them get results. From that very first client way back on May 1st, 2020. Again, I wouldn't have a business without my clients really giving me that trust So I want to thank every single client. And then I want to also just thank my team. I have an incredible team. They are amazing. They help me walk in my purpose by allowing me to stay in my zone of genius, and they do the rest and they do it so well. So I really, really want to thank my team. And, I have a small but mighty group of friends who are so encouraging and supportive of me. And not everyone gets it. I've definitely had a lot of changes in my relationships from taking this step. Not everyone is going to get it, but I love my friends who do and who provide me guidance and, encouragement, and just sometimes also a shoulder to cry on because it gets hard in these entrepreneur streets. So, yeah, I want to thank them as well.
I
And
want to,
myself. I want to thank myself. I want to thank me for never stopping.
that's awesome. Dr. Kimmy, I want you to have a monologue. I want you to name this person, living or not. This person has inspired you so much. Who is that person and what are you saying to that person?
So definitely my mother, who is no longer living. She is my biggest source of inspiration. What I would say to her is thank you so much for, you know, being a single mom, putting us first, sacrificing so much so that we could get to where we are in life. But also thank you for pointing me to the Lord and living your life as a woman of faith so that I knew exactly where to go in those moments that were difficult or overwhelming or hard for me. Thank you for sharing your love of children with me. My mom was a pediatric nurse, and I think I became a pediatrician likely because of my exposure to that. And I would just say to her that, even if you didn't get to fully realize your dreams, like on this side of life, I am, and I am because you were. I'm everything I am because of who you are. And so, yeah, I would tell her, about my kids. She never got to meet my daughter. No, that's not true. She met my daughter, but my daughter was a very young baby when she passed away. So, I would tell her about her grandson Israel, her first grandson. He's doing well. He's 13 now. He's an incredible human and he reminds me so much of her. And my daughter is 7, and I don't know where she got her personality from, but she would just be like so thrilled to have such a spunky, hilarious um, granddaughter. And I would just let her know we're okay. We're good. We're okay down here.
And sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
What have you not done in life that you dream about often that you would like to do?
Definitely the nonprofit. I mean, obviously I do lots of kind of like volunteer work with my church and in my community, etc. But I want to use my skills and my expertise in service to my community. So again, I picture a huge community center in Overtown, which is the area of Miami where they built I-95 through decades and decades ago, and it just decimated the Black community there. We had a very thriving Black community there, and we had businesses and housing, and they intentionally decimated it because that often happens in American history when Black people are thriving. I want to really be a part of rebuilding that area and providing, like I said, services for women of color who desire to be entrepreneurs but wouldn't have like the access to capital, funding, mentorship, coaching. I want to provide that for them. I think about that often. It's why I, continue doing what I'm doing because that's the ultimate goal. And so I gotta, have money in order to serve in that way. So that's why one of the reasons I keep showing up in my business.
If you lost everything and you had to rebuild in 30 days, what industry and why?
Same industry. So I would sell. I would do a webinar. I would sell. I think that's a really great part of coaching. And when you coach in the way that I do with intellectual property, my intellectual property is up here, right? So like even if I lost, quote unquote, lost everything, God forbid, I still have my IP. I still have my intellectual property. So I would somehow find a way to go to, I don't know, a library, or I would borrow someone's computer. Um, and I would host a training and I would teach and I would sell my offer in that way. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would stay in the exact same industry I'm in now. There's low overhead. All you need is a Zoom link. So yeah, that would be my plan.
The word is play. How did you play or how will you play today?
Oh, that's a good question. I need to do more of that. I am really working on that. I love reading and I would love to just walk with like an audiobook, but like an audiobook that isn't, I read a lot of like, personal development, business development, selling, entrepreneurship type books. I would love to just take a walk and listen to an audiobook that is fiction or that is really lighthearted and playful. And so that's something I'm really actually glad you asked me that question because I need to spend more time. I need to spend a lot more time doing that, right? Like incorporating play into my life. I do love travel and I do get to do that, but lately it does feel like a lot of travel for business as well. So yeah, some good reading and then also some travel for leisure. But today I think I'm going to try to do the walk. I'm going to commit to doing that.
What can we do today to support your business, Dr. Kimmy?
Thank you for asking that. That's such a kind question. If you know a doctor, I would just point them to my podcast. You could just say, "Hey, I heard about this lady and named Dr. Kimmy. She has something called the Doctor Coach School, and she has a podcast by the same name. You should check it out." So if you know a physician or a dentist, especially one that has thought about transitioning or doing something different in their lives, I would love it if you would point them to my work. They can just listen to my podcast and binge those episodes. So yeah, that would be incredible if you just share and spread the information about the work that I do.
Thank you for that. You mentioned books. What book would you recommend and why?
I have so many, but I would say I'm actually going to show it to you. It lives on my desk because I try to read it every day, like a part of it every day. The Greatest Salesman in the World. This book completely changed the game for me, for my business. I have a lot of books that I love and that I recommend, but it would be that one. And then a close second would be a book called The Go Giver instead of Go Getter, The Go Giver. That's another incredible book that I read pretty early on in my entrepreneurship journey, and it also changed my life.
And you talked about a book, a light reading, and I don't know if it's really a light reading, but You've Been Chosen by St. Marshall.
Oh, okay.
She
I'll
is,
definitely write that one down.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. I went through that book in a day and I hadn't found a book. And she's African American woman who is, I believe, I don't want to butcher her title, but she's with the Dallas Mavericks. And it talks
Okay.
about her journey up the corporate ladder, but she started really talking about she was diagnosed with cancer and how she went through that process. But it was really, she wrote a really good book. And I really couldn't put it down and finished it in a day. And I haven't done that in a while it was just a great read. So
Thank you so much. I will
yeah,
definitely check that out.
yes. Share with our audience a piece of advice about the coaching industry that they don't know that they should know.
Well, one of the things I was reading very recently, and I might get the exact numbers wrong, but coaching is currently if it's like $1.5 billion to $2 billion industry. And however, when we look at women of color coaches, we are often making on average less than $24,000 a year in our coaching businesses. And so I think that and one of the other things that I've been reading about in terms of coaching is I think sometimes it's tempting to say like everyone's coaching now, the coaching industry is saturated. Coaching has been around for years and years, like decades. And it's becoming very popularized now, but it is a very old profession. And so the advice would really be to just understand that, and one of the things that we as women of color, we do is we want to be of service, right? Like I said, we are givers. We want to give, we want to help people, or we want to start a nonprofit to help, or, your biggest focus in your business it needs to be creating income. It has to be creating income. And so the things that we do sometimes, like, lowering our prices or giving things away for free, we just really have to stop doing that. If we want to be able to give something away for free, we're going to be able to do that so much better once we actually are making money and we have a profitable business. So focus on the profit, sell an offer that you can sell for a premium price, sign your clients that way. And then once you have that successful, profitable business, now you can pour into other communities. Now you can quote unquote give back, which I don't really actually like that term. I think we should just be giving, not necessarily trying to give back, but now we can give as much as we'd like to. And then now we can even give to, a lot of times we try to sell our coaching to people who don't focus on selling to people who aren't able to buy your coaching. Focus on giving away your services to those people in the future after you have a successful business.
When you talk about women of color and specifically African American women, why do you think that mindset is around giving away everything or not valuing our worth? Mm-hmm. And when you said we need to focus on profits first, and that's actually a book, Profits First. And we're not boxing in and saying all women of color or all African Americans
absolutely
are doing
not. Yeah.
this. We're not saying that at all. But why do you think that is? Because numbers, they don't lie. And the reason, just statistically, we're, Black businesses, we barely make $50,000 a year. So what is causing that lull?
So to your point, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I will say for me, right? So I'll extrapolate from myself. One of the reasons that I focused on that, I think that we have been socialized to not show our value. We've been socialized to give, right? They brought us here, right? And essentially enslaved our ancestors, and our whole role was to give, right? And so it's ingrained in society, and in some ways even ingrained in us. And so it's not necessarily our fault per se, but it is our responsibility to notice it and to decide to make that change. But yeah, like, we've been socialized to give. We've been socialized to not see our worth or our value outside of giving, outside of the service that we can do to someone else. I mean, they literally took our breast milk and gave it to their babies. I mean, we weren't even allowed to feed our own. So, there's something called epigenetics in medicine, where we are passing along those traumas generation after generation. It's like actually built into our cells, and that's not woo-woo stuff. That's like that's science. It's built into us. So I think one of the things is just being aware of it. That has to be that first step, is some awareness of it. And then getting in communities where we are bucking the norm, where we are going against the status quo, where we are deciding intentionally that we're going to do something different. But yeah, it's a part of just society. And so, but we have a chance to do something different.
Dr. Kimmy, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
I guess that's a good question. I feel like you asked a lot of good questions. So I'm trying to I would say the question I might ask myself is, what do you do in the moments when you are struggling or you're having a hard time in business or you feel like giving up? Because it still happens, even, with the revenue that I'm able to generate in my business and the amount of people I'm able to help. I still have those moments when I, want to throw in the towel, or I'm, feeling really overwhelmed or tired or frustrated. And the answer to that question is I think sometimes I found myself doing this in the past, spiritually bypassing and just saying like, oh, God will fix it. It'll work out. Everything will be fine. One of the biggest things I have done is to just really get honest with myself, get honest with my feelings, my emotions, like I talked about previously, and don't make my emotions a problem. I was born with emotions. Emotions put us into action. That's why they're called emotions, right? So don't make them a problem. Just notice them, but don't push them down. Don't try to repress your feelings. Don't try to, I actually spent time right before our interview coaching myself, like, writing down a list of like questions for myself, like what am I struggling with? Why do I think this is happening? And I spend time there and I get really real with myself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's helped me is I keep it real honest with myself and with my coaches and mentors. And I lean on others for support as well.
We've come to the part of the interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
I'm ready.
Your first job.
Gap Kids.
Your ideal car.
Cadillac Escalade.
Your favorite comfort food.
Anything. Oh, I'll say stew peas, Jamaican stew peas.
The last movie you saw?
The Little Mermaid.
You relax doing what?
Taking walks.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Beyonce.
Your favorite dance song?
Boosie, Wipe Me Down.
Workout or hit the couch?
I don't do either. I'm never on my couch, which is a problem. I'll say workout. I'll consider working out.
Thank you, Dr. Kimmy, for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Absolutely. So the best way to find me is to go to thedrcoachschool.com. thedrcoachschool.com. From there, you can check out my podcast, which is called the Dr. Coach School Podcast. And you can just tap into any of our upcoming trainings, webinars, or even just get on our email list. I'm primarily on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Dr. Kimmy _, but you should be able to find all of that on the website, thedrcoachschool.com.
Thank you, Dr. Kimmy. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.